Hello, hello. My name is April Malone with Yes, I Work From Home, and this is the podcast. Today I have a special guest from, let's see, you're in the Philippines currently, but you're generally based in Singapore. We've got Parekh
That's
with
right.
us.
You
Go
got it
ahead,
right.
Malik. I practiced a couple of times, but uh, Malik, go ahead and tell us a little bit about why you are where you are, what you've been doing. I know you have quite a rich history of working in big companies, and now you've been consulting and traveling and speaking and writing. So go ahead and tell us all about it.
Sure. Yeah. So my most recent project was actually when I took a sabbatical last year. I ended up writing a book. The original plan was actually to travel around the world with the family when I took a sabbatical, and one by one we had to cancel all those trips. And I thought this was the perfect time to go through my bucket list and see what else I can do while I cannot travel. And there it was, writing a book. So
What a
I
what a way to make lemonade out of lemons.
I know, yeah, exactly. That's how I felt. And this book has been marinating in my head for a very long time, at least for the last 3 years, for two reasons. One, as a CEO of a large BPO company based out of the Philippines, I was starting to see three very powerful trends that were gaining momentum, gaining strength, and yet they were under the radar. That people were not paying a lot of attention to. And in 2016, my daughter was born. My first daughter was born, Clara. And that really changed my perspective on life and my relationship with the future. Before
Mhm.
I would only think about the future when I'm putting together a 5-year sales forecast or the business expansion plan. But suddenly I started to think about the future as to what kind of future she's going to inherit, what kind of
Mhm.
skills and talents she would need to thrive in the next 10, 20, 30 years. And so I started paying attention to some of the trends that were taking place around us that gave me the insight as to where the world is going to. So the book that I ended up writing last year is called Futureproof: Your Career and Your Company. How to flourish in an era of artificial intelligence, digital natives, and the gig economy.
Would you be willing to tell me what you mean by digital natives? Because I know digital nomads.
Yeah. Well, the digital natives, I'm using that term loosely to reflect what we see with the Gen Xers and also the younger millennials, because they all have very unique set of skills that as a Gen Xer, I didn't have. I did not grow up with a smartphone in my hand when I was 11
Mhm.
years old. I
No.
did not see smartphone, advancing itself, upgrading itself every 2 years. I did not see the internet connectivity increasing tenfold between, 2009 to 2019. They saw all of that. They saw the Siri becoming better, faster, and smarter. So they
Mhm.
lived in a world where technology was basically changing and upgrading itself on a regular basis. And they expected that from the world around them. So they are
Mhm.
called digital natives because they speak digital natively. All of us had to actually learn.
Right.
Digital is my second language. It's not my first language. But
I
for
get
my
it now.
daughter, who is a 4-year-old, and she is
Mhm.
not even a Gen Xer, she belongs to the Gen Alpha,
All
the
right.
Alpha generation. Um, I call her, the Gen TikTok because that's what she does all day long. And
Well, I get it.
she's going to grow up in a different world.
Right. We experienced this last night. We were driving to we think that we might have our kids in school this year, but we might change our mind tomorrow when they're supposed to go back because of the pandemic that continues to rage on. Um, we, when I was a kid, my parents bought an encyclopedia. I was about 11 years old. And anytime I wanted to learn anything about anything, I would go first to the encyclopedia and, find the volume. And it was
Yeah.
like taking up this much space on the wall. My children just say, Alexa, and they'll just
That's
ask whatever question they have. And we were in the
absolutely.
car. We were
Yeah.
driving and we don't have Google or Siri activated by voice on our phones. We don't
Yeah.
want her listening to us all the time. And my daughter was like, Siri, Alexa, Google. She was trying to ask a question, and we were like, none of this activated right now. You're going to have to like ask one of us, or we
That's
can look
right.
it up. But
Yeah.
yeah, I understand what you're saying. Like they are so accustomed to just being able to speak out their question and instantly have
Yes.
the answer.
Absolutely. So they're a different breed. And something else to keep in mind is that, by 2030, two-thirds of the global workforce will be made up of Gen Xers and millennials.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very important number because today Gen X has become the largest generation in the world with 2.47 billion people.
Mm.
Millennials come very close to them, 2.4 billion people. So when you do the math, when they are the largest segment of our population, and they're going to become the major force at the work as well as in the marketplace, we may need to start paying attention to them because so far we keep ignoring them or discarding them because they are just the intern or the headphone wearing, soy latte drinking weirdos that show up in the workplace. Well, these people are going to be sitting in a position of power and influence, and we better, get used to that. So that's a very influential trend that will change the way work gets done over the
I
next
get
10,
that.
20 years.
And
Yeah.
then, I don't want to make video games the scapegoat, but the way that our television and our games, these kids have a shorter attention span than we do. And it's going to be really interesting when they're all our boss.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, you are absolutely right. We grew up when my parents would say, "Hey, here is the book. Entertain yourself," and you would read the book over the next 3, 4 days and finish it,
Mm-hmm.
or you'll watch a movie for 2 hours, and you'll get excited when your parents would say, "You know what? We are going to go for a movie today," and I'm like, "Hey, I can't imagine how my daughter is going to be in any of that setting of reading a book or watching a whole movie because she cannot even finish a 15-second TikTok video. Before it's done, she scrolls it up.
Oh,
So
wow.
we are dealing with a generation that has zero patience.
Hmm.
Either you capture their attention in the very first milliseconds, not even 3 seconds, 4 seconds. Instantly, they know whether they're going to watch this entire video or not,
Wow.
and
Yeah.
that is going to grow with them, in other parts of their lives.
I have been thinking a lot about resumes lately, and I've been considering putting myself back into the workforce in a more formal capacity rather than just freelancing or doing independent contractor work, which was what I've been doing for 3.5 years. My job was displaced by artificial intelligence. Voice recognition technology displaced me. I worked for
Uh-huh.
Mayo Clinic for 17 years as a medical transcriptionist, and the computer was so much faster than the rest of us, and then eventually they just made the doctors do their own editing because
Yep.
we didn't have to sit there working like little typists all day long. They just did it themselves with the computer.
Yep.
But yeah, that's really affected me, and I'm looking at my kids and I'm like, wow, you are going to live in a completely different world. My 9-year-old is spending a lot of time learning coding, and I'm like, continue that. That's a good thing.
Yes.
It's not just
Yes.
playing with computers now. This is your future.
Yes. Yes. And instead of just consuming, creating, right?
Yeah.
Either you are a
Right.
consumer or you are a creator, and there are times
Mm-hmm.
when we are both. At times we are creator in our lives, and there are times we are consuming media or
Mm-hmm.
consuming different items. And I think the goal for the future is, can you bring your inherent human creativity to the workplace? So you actually brought up an excellent point about artificial intelligence. That's one of the three trends that I talk about in the book.
Yeah.
That according to a recent study done by McKinsey, up to 375 million jobs are at risk of displacement over the next 10 years by
Mm.
2030. 375 million jobs globally, right? So, one of the questions that I get asked all the time, April, when I'm doing these seminars or podcasts is, how do I know whether my job is at risk or not? And there are three ways to look at it, right? So, one, If you're doing something that is boring, repetitive, and predictable, then most
You're at
likely,
risk.
yeah. I mean, if you're flipping burgers, somebody
Mm,
else is going to be doing that, and it's not going to be a human. It's going to be a machine.
mm,
If you're checking in guests at a hotel, somebody else is going to do that. If you're creating reports, the same report week after week after week, or if you're reading the same report week after week after week, somebody else will be able to do that. The second
mm,
thing to keep in mind is that if what you do has a very uh, defined objective, and there is a large set of historical data you can train AI algorithm with, then AI can do your job. So, recently Google announced that their AI algorithm did a better job reading mammograms than human beings. Why? Because there is a defined objective to look for tumors and to decide whether it's benign or malignant.
wow.
And there is a large set of historical data. There are so many mammograms, millions and millions of
Hmm.
that from the
To
past.
compare.
They were able to feed, yeah, exactly, to AI algorithm, and it learned very quickly. And the third thing is, if what you do is just basic cognitive skill, it requires only basic cognitive skills like learning, reasoning, predicting, then AI can do your job. So, Netflix, for example, how does Netflix come up with the recommendations for your movies or for your TV serials, right? Based on the past behavior, based
Yeah.
on your viewing history. It's not humans who are watching you and spying on you. It's an AI algorithm that's looking at your viewing history and
Hmm.
coming up with what else would April like to watch on Netflix.
Hmm. Other
So
people who have watched this also watch that. That's how Amazon gives its recommendations too.
absolutely, yeah. So all of those things are actually, they used to be done in the past by humans, but now all of that is done by artificial intelligence. So if you belong to any of these three categories, then I think you need to pay attention to what else can you upskill with, what else can you reskill with. And the key theme in the book that I write, that I published recently, April, is that focus on the inherent human advantages that you have. What are some of the inherent human advantages we have? Our creativity. AI still cannot create something out of nothing. We can look at a sunset and be inspired to do a masterpiece when it comes to painting, or write a poem, or create a musical note. AI cannot do that. AI cannot look at a sunset and come up with a painting, a masterpiece. Only humans have that ability to do that. Only humans have the ability to look at the world holistically. Imagine if AI was the president or a prime minister of a country during the COVID-19 situation. It
Hmm.
will be completely at lost because it,
Yeah.
it doesn't know how to deal with something holistically.
Uncharted territory is not its friend.
Unexpected, right?
Yeah.
Unexpected, unprecedented things that have not happened. AI doesn't know how to deal with those things. Only humans have the ability to inspire and lead others, right? Can you imagine at this point? I mean, and maybe 50 years from now, 100 years from now, maybe there will be an AI that would be able to inspire and lead people. But today we have that inherent ability to touch people's hearts with our leadership skills, with our inspiration skills.
I feel like what you said a few moments ago about if your job is predictable, repetitive, basic cognitive skills and these things, you might have made a few people panic a little bit
Uh-huh.
about their jobs. So,
Mhm.
what types of things are you seeing are the future as far as when you said people can reskill or upskill? Where do you see that growth happening right now?
So, one of the unique skill that companies would need going forward is people bringing their unique set of skills and set of experiences and finding intersections. So, what I mean by that is, let me give you an example of Leonardo da Vinci.
Okay.
When somebody asks me, what would I want my daughter to be over the next 15 years, 20 years when she grows up? My parents would say, "Oh, I want Maulik to be doctor or engineer," because it was easy at that time growing up in India. Either you become a doctor or engineer. It's not that easy anymore. So
Yeah.
I always say, I want them to be like Leonardo da Vinci. Why? Because Leonardo da Vinci was not just a painter. He was an architect. He was a
Inventor.
master in a variety of fields. And the
Right.
reason why he created so much advantage for the humanity, the reason why he added so much value to our lives is because he was able to see what happens at the intersection of these very disparate fields. You know, Steve Jobs, when he announced iPad 2 in 2011, I believe, he had a big screen behind him. And the screen had an intersection with one street sign saying technology and the other one saying humanities. And he said,
Hmm.
Apple makes people's hearts sing because it works at the intersection of technology and humanities. So, what can people do going forward is come up with as many different experiences as possible. If you're analytical and you've been told that, oh, you can only be good in math, go and improve your creative skills. If you are a creative person, work on your analytical skills. The people who would thrive in the next 10, 20 years are the ones who are firing their entire brain. You know, they are
Hmm.
going on all cylinders, left brain, right brain, creative brain, analytical brain, because it's those intersections that are magical. And the reason why they're magical is because AI cannot get to those intersections yet. AI only knows how to read a mammogram, how to beat you in chess, but AI cannot do both, right? So
Yeah.
if you can come up with something that only you have the ability to do as a human, which is to find these intersections between a variety of fields, then you are, going to be thriving in this arena. I mean, I always tell people that it's basically don't become a one trick pony. Don't become
Yeah.
a one trick pony. Because
Yeah.
if you're a one trick pony, if you're the only thing you can do is become a paralegal, AI can do that job today.
Mm.
There are thousands of paralegals who are at risk right now losing their jobs to AI because what paralegals can do, AI can do it very easily. But if you are a multi-trick pony, where you have multiple tricks in your bag, then AI cannot touch you.
When Mayo Clinic offered me, it wasn't a severance package, it was a separation package because it was voluntary. I looked around and most of the people that I worked with, 95% of them maybe, only had done this one job for their whole life and
Yeah,
only had the 1 year of education it took to do that job.
yeah,
And I took myself out because I said, I have degrees, I have, a bachelor's degree and a master's degree. And even if I'm not really good at piano or pottery or photography and I don't really have, at that point, I didn't have experience with being an adult educator, even though that's what my master's was in. I said, just the fact that I have these degrees has opened up so many more doors for me. I
yeah,
almost feel like I should remove myself so that they can try to keep their job a little bit longer
yeah,
to have a chance. I have waited tables, I have substitute taught, I have worked in with youth and traveled. And just the fact that I had this variety of experience. Now, I know they used to say, jack of all trades, master of none, and
yeah.
that makes you look like you're, indecisive or something.
Mhm.
No, I have built up multiple skills over these years that have given me the ability to pivot. And that's what you're talking about is
Yes,
like if you have more than one talent or skill that you've trained yourself in, you can, when times get hard, go down a different track where everyone else is just stuck
absolutely.
and they stop.
Yeah, I mean, Steve Jobs, when he was attending school, he went to take classes in calligraphy.
Ah,
Then he lived in India in an ashram working on his spirituality. I
really?
mean, when you look at his life, the reason why he became so successful at Apple is because he brought all of those unique experiences to life. Why do we love Apple products? Because not just because technically they are good, but there is something about the user interface. It is so easy to work with. It is so
Intuitive.
it's very intuitive. That's right. Yeah. So he was able to tap into both his technical skills as well as his marketing skills, his creative skills, and his experience in calligraphy. So you're absolutely right. The fact that you have had all these experiences, they're going to set you apart from someone who just had done one thing their whole life.
Yeah. Why don't you talk a little bit about your work from home situation, if you're willing?
Yes, of
I know
course.
you mentioned to me before we started recording that you are not exactly where you planned on being right now.
Well, I mean, so I said goodbye to my corporate job in March of 2020, just
Oh,
in
wow.
time. Yeah, I know. I mean, it was not planned that way. I did not have any foresight that the world is going to go upside down. I
Right.
have been planning that transition with my successor for almost a year. Um, but the goal was to actually go for a sabbatical, travel around the world, and then start doing some angel investment, potentially start a company. And all
Hmm.
of those things could be done working from home. And
Hmm.
even if there was no COVID-19 situation, I probably would have done the same thing because I wanted to spend some time with my kids,
Hmm.
be around when they're young and
Yeah.
they are impressionable, versus wait until they're 15 years old and I have no connection with them.
Yeah.
So what I'm doing right now is working just fine, and it's not going to be any different even if the COVID-19 situation changes. I plan
Okay.
to kind of have this lifestyle that I have created where I'm able to connect with my investment companies as an angel investment. I'm about to start a business here in the Philippines, specifically helping companies hire future ready workforce, just what we were talking about earlier. And my entire business model is actually my whole team, my whole company will be working from home.
Oh, good.
That's the whole model we have because we don't need. The world is going in a direction where everything is virtual, right?
Hmm.
The companies who are sitting on massive assets are the ones who are struggling whenever there is a situation like COVID-19 because they have to worry about their overhead costs. They have to worry about,
Oh,
yeah,
okay. So that makes you a little bit more future proof again.
yeah. I mean, I have to, drink my own Kool-Aid a bit and and walk my talk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. So are you in the middle of building this or is it already in place?
It's we are there are a couple of government approvals that you need to start a recruiting or a placement agency here in the Philippines.
Okay.
So we are in the process of doing that, but I have already identified the people that I would like to launch the business with.
Hmm.
They are also getting ready. We are all gearing for it. I'm in a process of setting up the website, and process of setting up all the employment contracts, the client contracts, the proposals that we'll be sending out to the clients. So all of that is done, but you don't need an office space for that. You can do all of that through Zoom, working with different people.
Does the mail come to your home?
Um, well, I think a lot of it now is that's another thing we have done is we have gone fully digital. So we are trying to essentially do everything through Google Docs.
Hmm.
Even the documents we send to our clients are done through Google Docs. They can sign it digitally. I can sign it
Hmm.
digitally. So we want to be paperless. We want to be virtual. We want to be online.
Okay.
And because we are going to tell people that, hey, that's where you should be going to. And
Hmm.
if we are telling them that's where they're going to, we cannot be going back to the 18th century.
So if you were working corporate up until March of 2020, were you in
Yeah.
an office at that point?
Oh, yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, just to give you an idea, I was running one of the largest business process outsourcing companies here in the Philippines. We had over 12,000 employees, most of them in the Philippines, but some in the US as well as in Nicaragua.
Mm.
And it was growing. And all these people come to our contact centers, these large office spaces where we'll set up call centers who are supporting US or Australian or clients from around the world.
Okay.
So office was a centerpiece of what we did. But
Hmm.
all of that has changed also. The entire BPO industry has changed here in the Philippines. Almost 50% of the workforce for the industry is working from home. They were
Right.
able to figure that out.
Are you saying VPO or BPO?
BPO, business process outsourcing.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah,
And how was that for you? Yeah, I know you had planned on traveling, and that was, I'm sure, a disappointment because your whole plan changed. And then
yeah.
you sat down to write a book. And did you have a desk in your home?
No, I thought I spent a lot of time thinking, okay, I'm going to write a book, so I must have all these things in place. And honestly, I ended up writing my entire book sitting on a sofa with my legs on the table in front of
Arm.
me.
Oh
That
wow,
was
yeah.
just like, yeah, I had, that was the most comfortable way to write the book. I was in my zone, and there was this one space. As soon as I sit down there, it almost like was a trigger to me that, okay, Maulik, you're about to now focus on this. So that space became very sacred to me.
Hmm.
And there was no need for me to actually, have a table and a chair and, a computer and all that. It was just a laptop.
How did your neck and shoulders and arms do with that situation? Were you comfortable? Like literally comfortable?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I people told me that when you're writing a book, don't write for more than 2 hours. But I
Okay.
wanted to get it done. I didn't know when the COVID-19 is going to end, because then I was going to start traveling. So I'm like,
Right.
no, I'm going to go at it. So within 4 months, I wrote a 200-page book, and then
Wow.
the remaining 2 months, I was basically editing it and making it more succinct and what I thought was a better version of it. So I ended up writing 5, 6 hours a day. I mean, I would write for
Wow.
2 hours early in the morning, then I would play with my kids, and then come back to it in the afternoon. And then in the evening, before I go to bed, I'll do the research for the next day. And so that, I have fresh ideas when I wake up in the morning and kind of go with it. But no issues. And then just to kind of keep myself sane, I was doing yoga at home, and I have been doing
Yeah.
yoga for many years now. And
That'll
that
help.
kind of kept my body in check. Yeah.
I think that's my next step is to implement a yoga routine because I do stretches. I have had some injuries and I'm always very concerned about
Mm.
other people who might have habits that, might lead them into the kind of path I've gone down. And I always am like, make sure I also do some of my writing on the couch.
Yeah.
When I even type my show notes for these, it takes me about 15, 20, 30, 45 minutes sometimes to like remember what we talked about and add a few things that, to fill out the bio that people send me, to put it in my own words. And it takes a little while. And I do often take my computer down to the couch and do exactly what you said, put your feet up on the table. I'm short. And our table's kind of tall. So I use a footstool
Yeah. For sure. Yeah.
to be more comfortable. But yeah, as long as you're comfortable and it doesn't turn into pain,
Yeah.
go for it if it's working.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it sounds like you're getting up, you're moving, you're stretching, and that's part of your routine. And you've got little children to play with and get down on the floor
Exactly.
and move around.
Yeah. So I mean, it was a good balance of physical activities, and then we'll take them to the park until the park was open, and then even park closed because of the lockdown, and we had to then walk around in the house.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
What part of the Philippines are you in?
In Metro Manila.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So right there
Which is the
in the center.
biggest city. It's like
Hmm.
13 million people.
Yeah.
Um,
So your
so
internet, is it pretty secure and fast, or does it have any ups and downs? I live in a metro area smaller than yours, but we still have internet problems sometimes.
we do here in the beginning, because I think it was a shock to the telco system here in the
Oh, I'm
country,
sure.
because their pipes were designed in such a way that during the day, all the traffic is going to the office spaces. And
Mm,
during the night, they would turn on the traffic going to people's homes, because that's when
I
they're
see.
watching Netflix. But
Right.
then what happened with the COVID-19 is the entire
Everyone went
day,
home.
everybody's at home.
Hmm.
So they had a hard time, changing that. So first couple of months were very difficult.
Hmm.
We had some outages or very slow connectivity issue.
Oh, yeah.
But now it's super fast, and I actually don't connect Wi-Fi. I actually hardwire the
Same.
Wi-Fi connector into my laptop, and
Yeah. I
it's
use
doing quite well.
the Ethernet to the computer.
Ethernet, yeah.
I have to have a, docking station to make it work, but it makes a big difference,
Oh yeah,
especially for video conferencing calls.
yeah,
I was I was recording. I'm going to probably re-record it so it hasn't been published yet. Just talking a little bit about putting your best foot forward if you're going to do, say, a job interview and not just a podcast interview. And
Yeah.
that lag, that even that millisecond amount of, disconnect between the conversation
Yeah.
can really kind of make you feel awkward and
Yeah.
uncomfortable, and you're interrupting each other and talking over each other. And
Yep.
if you put that wire into your computer, if possible, it makes all the difference, I
Oh,
think.
huge difference. I
And
mean,
it's more secure.
it's more secure, and to your point, I mean, no issues whatsoever with video calls, and we do
Mhm.
a lot of that nowadays. So it's nice to
Yeah.
at least see people without them breaking or having
Yeah.
pixelized faces.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. It makes all the difference. Well, so want to talk about your frustration with working from home and your challenges you faced?
Well, I think in the beginning it was a bit of a challenge because you're used to going to the office. That's your mindset, right? When you are driving towards the office, you're already getting into the mindset of going to work, and then you have a
Yeah.
bunch of people who are working with you.
Hmm.
So obviously, working from home, you don't have that support system. But I knew that because even before COVID-19, my goal was actually to shift from corporate world to becoming an entrepreneur
Hmm.
or becoming an angel investor. And when you do those things, those are solitary pursuits. So I wouldn't say that my challenge was related to working from home. My challenge actually was related to my choice in life, which was to leave the corporate world behind and start something on my own, which required me to be very self-actualized,
Hmm.
bring out all the inspiration from me. There aren't any people around me who are, cheering me up. It's all me. I'm my biggest cheerleader and
Right.
running at it. At the same time, obviously, making sure that I'm available for everything that's happening at home as well. So I think that was the biggest challenge. But now, having done this for 15, 16 months, I would not go back to corporate world. I would not want to go back to the office environment
Yeah.
because I love the freedom that this lifestyle has provided to me.
Yeah. Well, and if you're talking about people who work from home, I have mentioned this a few times in the past, just that there are so many different things it can look like. You
Yeah.
can be working from home for yourself or for someone else.
Yep.
And if you're working for someone else, are you on their hours or your hours? Are
That's
you on
right.
their terms or your terms? Who's the boss really?
That's right.
So if you want to work from home, you need to think about, am I going to have the freedom that I expect? When people knew I worked for Mayo Clinic, they thought that I was just working from some, coffee shop and doing my job and, watching my kids. And there were rules. I could not watch my kids while I was working. I could not go to the coffee shop. I had to punch in and punch out and tell them when I was going to take my lunch. There was very
Yep.
rigid. So as you're setting up an environment where you're going to be working with a virtual staff, um, I guess, what are you planning? Are you planning on giving them some of the flexibility that you're enjoying, or are they going to have to cover the phones at certain hours and clock in and clock out?
Well, that's a good question. It all depends on when they are most effective with the job that they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So my philosophy is we have to not think about what works for us, but what works with our clients. So when are the clients working in our case, right? Our clients are basically the HR heads or the CEOs of companies in the Philippines.
Okay.
Typically, they work during the daytime. So,
Mm-hmm.
their work hours are 9 to 5, 9 to 6. So as long as employees are able to get their job done,
Mm-hmm.
providing the support these clients need during those hours, it doesn't really matter to me whether they take 2 hour lunch at home or they take their dogs for a walk during the lunch hour. It's up
Yeah.
to them as long as their main work is done. So the
Uh-huh.
flexibility is going to be given to them, just like I appreciate the flexibility that I have. I want them to have that. So there is no such concept about having a time card or keeping a tab on their system to see when they were working and then when
Oh
they were
yeah.
not. Because within a month, I would know whether they're putting in the hours and the effort or not.
Getting it done or not. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Will you have to also support people overseas from you? Will you need to have like a 24/7 staff, or is it going to just be in your own time zone?
For now, I think it's on the time zone, but our ultimate goal is to actually expand the operations first in Asia to Singapore and to India, and then eventually to countries like Australia and the US, because we
Okay.
believe that once we create a model on how we can help companies find future-ready workforce, then that model can be replicated in different parts of the world as well.
And what is the best way to describe someone who is future ready?
Someone who is a lifelong learner. Anybody who thinks that their education ended when they got their degree is up for a big surprise. But if someone is just curious about the world, is willing to always learn new things, is willing to improve herself, himself with new skills, is going to be thriving in the next 10 to 20 years. You know, there was a study done and they found out that the half life of a skill has gone down to 5 years now.
Oh,
Meaning,
wow.
within 5 years, your skill that is bringing you money is going to be worth only 50%.
Hmm. I can see that. Like I'm thinking about some of my past jobs, and within 5 years, almost all of the programs that we use are changing. I could not do, even when I was doing transcription work within 5 years. We were typing into a new platform, we were using new technology, and you could not do it the old way and survive.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So it's something that we all have to keep in mind. So always keep learning, keep look at the world with the same set of curious eyes that I see in my daughter. You know, that's one thing they inspire me with. That for them, everything is just brand new, and if they look at the ants, and I write about that in the book, that when my daughter looked at the ants and she asked me, like, "What are these ants doing?" and I rolled my eyes. She spent an hour just watching what the ants were doing. That kind of a curiosity about something we don't know is going to be so powerful going forward.
This is the same daughter that can't watch TikTok for 15 seconds.
Yeah, but she enjoyed hanging out with
The
something
ants.
fascinated her. So maybe
Oh, yeah.
she's going to become a wildlife expert or
Yeah. I
a
mean,
s-
honestly, I think we sometimes have to remove ourselves and just get out into nature too, and to
yeah,
remember how to rest and enjoy and explore and appreciate, what we have out there.
yeah,
Um, Maulik, I thought that you were in Singapore when we got into the call, and I found out that you
sure.
weren't. Are you going to relocate?
That was the plan. And we would have actually moved the entire family to Singapore last June.
Mm,
Unfortunately, Singapore has a very strict quarantine rules, and I would be stuck with my two young kids, 4-year-old and 2-year-old, in a hotel room for 14 days. They don't give
mhm.
any exceptions to the kids. So I decided not to take that route at this point. But when things settle down, I think our goal is to make a move and see what that part of the world has to offer to us.
Right. And you're hoping to build part of your team there too, then.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the goal is to expand the business to the Singapore market as well.
Well, we've talked a little bit about how to future proof and how to be ready to reskill and upskill. What other advice do you have for people related to some of the things that you talk about in the future of work, for people who want to work from home, especially?
Well, I think there are a few things that I write in the book. There are 5 things people can do to future-proof their careers, and then the 5 things leaders can do to future-proof their companies. And just to briefly talk about what people can do to future-proof their careers, I mean, we talked about uh, being human, right? The title of that chapter is "The Future is AI. Be a Human." Very contradictory, paradoxical, but very powerful. That if
Right.
the future is AI, how you can thrive in the world is become a human. And it sounds kind of trite that, hey, we are already humans. What do you mean by becoming a human? It means unleashing our full human potential, unleashing everything we have inherent advantage with, and doing it better than what AI can do. So that's one. The
Can
second
you
thing
give
I
an
write about,
example?
I write about creativity, right? We talked about finding intersections. I talked about being like Leonardo da Vinci, not becoming a one-trick pony, but becoming a multi-trick pony.
Hmm.
Those are the themes that I talk about in the book when it comes to being a human, because those things today the AI is not able to do. The
Okay.
second thing I talk about is the future is change, be a catalyst, meaning, we are surrounded by change every day now, and the pace of change has actually accelerated now. And what that means is, instead of being a passive recipient of change, instead of being a passive observer of change, not only accept the change, but I think people who will go on to thrive in the future are the ones who are going to become the catalyst for change.
Mm.
They're going to say, oh my God, I see this changing happening. I'm not going to just accept it. I want to actually go and take the flag in my hand and run and tell the people this is where the world is going and this is how we need to move.
Wow.
Even
Yeah.
the companies are looking for those, right? Jeff Bezos was once asked, what kind of people are you looking for when you're promoting or when you're hiring? And he said, the number one quality I look for is people who are mavericks, people who are going to come in, shake things up. They're going to rock the boat a bit. We need more of that going forward.
It
So
feels
that's
like so counterintuitive to how children are trained. Like in schools, it's like, conform, follow the rules. And here, these companies are looking for the people who are ready to like bend, what has been known as, right and good.
no, and you are absolutely right. That's why I think we also need to look at how we are educating, how we are, how we have to change the future of education.
Yeah.
Right? In my podcast, I I had a guest. She's the CEO of one of the startups in the education arena called Greenfig, and
Okay.
she mentioned that the whole world of education has to change in order to prepare our young kids. I mean, imagine spending 4 years in a college that doesn't prepare you for a real life job anymore.
Hmm.
And more Gen Xers are staying away from going through that 4 year degree program because they would rather take a micro course with Udacity or Coursera, or find an employer who is going to invest in them to say, okay, we'll spend 2 years teaching you coding, or we'll spend 6 months teaching you this specific technical skills, and we'll continue to upskill you and reskill you. That's where the world is going. So if the universities don't change, if the education system doesn't change, I think we'll have a bigger problem.
Yeah. Wow. I guess I think about myself as Gen X, but I'm like 42 years old. So, all right. And as far as looking forward for your family, are there any other things that you are just in looking forward to enjoying with this new lifestyle? Like what has it allowed you to do that you couldn't have done otherwise?
Well, I'm spending a lot more time with my kids, and we have a routine, so I try to get them when I am at my most optimal. Typically what happens is we end up going to kids when we are at the end of our day after a long day of work,
Hmm.
or after we have spent hours stuck in traffic and we are, complaining and bitching about it,
Hmm.
while we are and getting angry about it. And then we come home and we bring that energy. So I
Hmm.
typically spend my time right after my yoga, where I am centered, I am full of positive energy, and I want to be with them during that time. And then in the evening, I spend some time with them after I go for a long walk, sometimes by myself, sometimes with my wife. And when you're walking 5, 10 kilometers, it really clears your head, and
Hmm.
all the energy that's stuck in you, it kind of releases and you start getting clarity in your life. So when I come back, then I want to spend some time with them just before they go to bed.
When you're
And
working during the day, are you in the same space as they are, or are they off at school, or do you close the door to get into an office?
um, they are in the same house. Right now, there are no schools in person, so they are hanging out in the same place. And I do run into them, So when I have lunch, they are hanging out in the kitchen. I have a lunch with them, but that's not my prime time with them. And that's not
Yeah.
the time that I look forward to. That's the time when
Mm,
I'm with them and they are eating, I'm eating, we are having a conversation, we are having fun. But that's not the time I'm able to give too much or a lot to them, right?
yeah.
But when I'm working, I'm in my room, and they know that when I'm in the room, they don't come and bug me about it at that time because
Okay.
they have other things going on during the day.
And how many hours are you getting done in a week
Well,
of work?
typically, yeah. I think right now it changes. So as we get to a point where we get our approvals for the business and we are about to launch it, it's increasing in terms of the number of hours because I'm working through a lot of streams, getting the
Right.
website done, getting the team ready, getting all the legal contracts done. All of that is happening at the same time.
Yep.
So the number of hours have gone from 4 hours a day to now probably, around 8 hours a day. And I would think that will continue probably until we launch. And once I have a team in place who are getting paid to do their thing, then I can probably start doing other things.
All right. So your book is available. Can we find it on the web, or where can we buy it?
Sure. So the book is available on Amazon. If you go to Amazon and you just search for Futureproof Your Career and Company, or you can also search by my name, Maulik Parekh,
Mhm.
and you will see it. It was, at least for a week on Amazon, one of the best sellers in category. So we
Good.
are super excited about it. We'll probably do one more promotion for the book in the next few months. And if people want to know more about my project, they can also go to my website, maulikparekh.com, and they can sign up for any email updates that I send out to people who have signed up.
So it's MAULIK PAREKH
That's right.
dot
Yeah.
com. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, any final thoughts before we head out?
No, hey, this was great fun chatting with you, April. Thank you very much. And I
Yeah.
think you're ahead of your time launching or hosting a podcast about, yes, I work from home, because I honestly believe, given how many people are embracing the freelancing work, and how different companies are looking at the mixture of people working from the corporate offices versus their home offices, that the future is going to be at home when it comes to work. A lot more of work will be done out of home office versus corporate offices as we look at the next 10 years. So
It's almost interesting to think about what that would do to the skyline. Do you know what I mean?
yeah, I mean, there are so many potential repercussions, right? So think about not only the skyline, but think about the political changes. Now, people don't have to live in Manhattan. People don't have to live in New York City. So what are they doing? They are going to suburbs, not even suburbs. They are actually going to smaller towns where they came
Mhm.
from. Typically, big cities are liberal in nature. What
Mhm.
happens to these people going back to those smaller towns, which are typically conservative in nature? So it not only changes the real estate landscape in a city, but
Mhm.
April, it actually has a potential to completely change how the politics is done, at least in the US.
Huge in the US. I'm getting
Yeah,
chills just thinking
yeah.
about how different that would be. Yeah.
So
Well.
I know, yeah. You're onto something. Keep up your great podcast. I think more and more people would come to you and probably listen to your podcast to understand how best to work from home and where it's going in the future.
I think our goal is just to share the diverse stories that are out there.
Yeah,
When you work from home, it doesn't mean one thing. It can mean what you want it to.
Yeah,
honestly, what route do you want to go? Follow that. So, all
that's
right,
right.
Maulik, thank you so much. This has been April Malone with Maulik Parekh, and we thank you so much. We'll see you next time.
Thank you, April. Thank you very much.